Visit Avery.com, Avary, for the most up-to-date news and information on Team Avery.
Avery, 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 Avery.
The Video Archives podcast with Quentin Tarantino and Roger Avery is back for season 2. Head on over to patreon.com/videoarchives to get ad-free exclusive content and bonus episodes. This is The Gala Show. I'm your reporter on the beat, Gala Avery. On this episode, my guests today are a writing-directing duo. In their newest movie, I Don't Understand You, art imitates life, as the on-screen characters mirror our real-life filmmakers. But let's be clear, the trouble they get into is pure fiction. The movie follows Dom and Kroll, an American couple on the verge of adopting a baby. But they've been struggling with finding the right fit and need time to reconnect. So they go to Italy and, well, the vacation is nothing short of disastrous. Mistakes happen. Today on the mic, I have David Joseph Craig and Brian Crano. Hey, David. Hey, Brian.
Hi,
hey, thanks for having us.
So before we bring up the topic for today, I have a question for you. Very serious. How did you guys first meet?
Oh, this is great. We were set up on a blind date by an agent.
Oh, by an agent.
Yeah, by a mutual friend. So I was this agent at the time worked at ICM, and I was casting my second movie, and we were going to get brunch on a Saturday and take a hike up Runyon. And on the way down the hill, she said, why are you single? You're nice and you're funny and whatever. Like, what are you looking for? And I said, I described what I was looking for. And then we went and made the movie, and I didn't talk to her for like 6 months. And then literally the night before, I'm taking a walk with my friend Liz and complaining about how I was not meeting anybody cool or interesting in LA. And she was like, in a sort of very like witchy kind of fun way, was like, just fucking put it in the universe and see what happens. And 8 a.m. the next day, Robin, that agent, called me up and said, I met that guy that you told me about, and I'd forgotten about this conversation. And she said, I've told him you're going out and just do it. And then I was like, I'm not going on a blind date. Send me a picture. And then she sent me a picture of David. And I was like, I'm absolutely going on a date with that guy. Oh. And and then we went on a date, and it was not very good. And I had been an editorial for 6 days a week for like, I don't know how many months. And I was like spastic and weird. And then, but I really liked David. And I was just like excited to talk to somebody else other than my editor. And so I called him up and I was like, that was weird. Why don't we just go hang out? And we could only see each other every once a week because I was working so much at the time. And that ended up probably being really good for us to sort of like look forward to seeing each other.
Yeah, it was like a slow burn.
Yeah. And anyway.
My experience was very different.
I was going to say, okay, we heard Brian's story, but now I want David's story. Maybe their real story, or there's a truth in between of the two of them together?
It's probably somewhere in between, but mine was 100%. She became my manager, and on our second meeting together, she was like, hey, I don't usually do this with clients, but are you single? And I said, yeah. And she said, I think I have a director friend who would be perfect for you. And I said, can I set you up on a date? And I go, absolutely not. I would be the worst blind dater on the face of this planet. Please do not do this. And instead of sending me a photo of him, she sent we're this ancient that she sent an email to the both of us with pictures of each other. So it was almost like a forced date on me. And I showed up to the date like completely like I and I'm only saying I'd be a bad blind dater because I second guess myself at every moment. Um,
He was,
and
by the way, just to paint a picture, when he showed up on the blind date, he was wearing like 11 scarves. I just want to just put that in your mind.
it was
Like, so I
once
was like,
it was once
I was
it
trying to
was
see
one
him, and I had to like peel through the scarves to see like what is there a human? Like, what is happening?
it was one scarf, but it was 11 scarves that had been sewn together. That let me it was still one
So the
scarf.
truth is somewhere in between all of
Yeah,
this.
Yeah, no, I won't give away why the first date was pretty ridiculous, but Brian did the admirable and really beautiful thing of earning a second date with me, and we ended up doing something out of both of our interests.
Oh, I love that. I love love stories. And I also love like LA specific love stories. Cause like the fact that
yeah,
the driving range in K Town is no longer there, like that's a piece of LA history that uh could be forgotten, but it is your love story. So
totally.
that's really, really
Yeah.
special. Now, as always, my guests get to bring their topic to the mic. So, David, Brian, why don't you tell us what your topic is and why you decided to choose it?
Well, we wanted to talk about adoption and how it works and stuff. And it's been obviously like for the last 5 years since we did it, and the 3 years previous when we were in the process of doing it has been kind of like a central mode of our lives and relationships. But it's also something that people have like really weird ideas about and have very little information about. And even us, until we went fully through it, had, kind of random, sort of culturally baked in ideas of how it works that are just not real. So it's useful to sort of talk about, and also to talk about maybe how other people, when approaching adopted families, can talk about it, because there's oftentimes like a lot of, um, like, well, who's the mom? Like there's kind of like weird, people get really weird about it, and it's just another kind of way of having a family. And so, yeah, that's the
I,
topic.
I know this is an immediate tangent, but I think the thing that also stands out to me is like the idea of how you decide to want children, and also the idea of how you decide we both had the curse and the luxury of deciding how we have a child, right? We had the option of surrogacy, we had the option of adopting in the United States. We had a smaller choice of adopting outside of the United States, because we're a homosexual couple, and many countries don't allow us to adopt outside of the United States. And so, you know, I think something for us that makes us respect adoption so much is that we took about a year and a half to figure out how we wanted to have a kid. You know, we went to like so many meetings and so many panels about surrogacy, and seeing if that was right for us, because we both came at it. When we first started the process, we both were, sort of, we neither of us aligned with how we wanted to have a kid. And so we did so much research to figure out what the best middle ground was for the both of us.
But before we get into the topic, it's time for a commercial break. Back by popular demand, the Video Archives merch store is up and running. Get your favorite t-shirts, hats, notebooks, stickers, and more at videoarchivesmerch.com. You know me. I write all my notes in the Notes on Cinema notebook, the Gala edition, of course. Check out videoarchivesmerch.com to get yours today. Hey, thanks so much for being a loyal listener. If you want to keep up with me off mic, make sure to follow me on Instagram at Gala Avery. And we're back. So that's our topic for today, adoption. I have 30 minutes on the clock and our time starts now. One thing I really like though is how you guys approached it, where there is a lot of, I don't even know if I want to use the term misinformation, but there's just a lot of confusion about adoption. And I know growing up, I had some friends that were adopted and they came blended families, like maybe they had one sibling who was from their parents and they were the adopted one, and I also had kids that were surrogates, and I had kids that were sperm donors. And so there's always a story behind like everyone's origin and where it began. So how did you guys decide on adoption versus surrogacy?
This really interesting thing happened for our family, which was like, um, if you're in a situation where you're so vulnerable, that was really terrifying to me. And what I didn't realize was like part of that is actually like a real demonstration of faith that you're going to show up and take care of somebody else's, biological child in a way that they have so much investment in. And I was thinking very selfishly until we met our birth mother. I was thinking like, oh, this is about us, and not really like this is a group. This is a thing we're doing together.
It's for the
Like
child.
totally, it's for the child, and it's for like it's forever. Like this is something that she's going to live with forever, and that we are going to live with forever, and our son is going to live with forever. And so I think that was the sort of thing that I learned ultimately was like it's not just about me, it's about all of us. And David was there already. I think he gets to things more quickly than I do sometimes. And so we had gone to there's this incredible organization for surrogacy for gay men in particular. And if you're interested in surrogacy, you should definitely go check this thing out. It's called menhavingbabies.org, I think. And they're a group of lawyers and early gay adoptive dads who like made this whole organization and advocated for queer surrogacy in general in the law. And so they do these events all over and have all this information. And I'm like the research department in our family that like there was so much fucking information. I was like, we should just do this. Like they've done it all. Like they know everything. Like we could just do this and we can just like slot ourselves into this system. And we went to one of those meetings, and by virtue of the time that we did that, it was like the day after. Was it the day after Trump got elected or something in 2016? Or like the day after he got nominated? It was like so now imagine like we were living in New York at the time. We're in like a fucking huge auditorium of gay men, and Trump has just been elevated to power. And we were all like, what the fuck is going to happen? Because this is terrifying, right?
It was uncertain.
Yeah, and it remains terrifying. And we went to this one. In surrogacy, you meet like you need an egg donor and you need a surrogate, and each of those have different, groups that you deal with. And we met with one egg donor, like organization, and she was like, "Oh, so you want like we're both white, blonde, blue-eyed men," and she's like, "Oh, you'll want that, right?" And she just made the assumption that we would want a child
Because then it would kind of look like you and resemble you and be
yeah.
similar to you.
Yeah, and something about that was so weird to us that we walked out of that room and we were like, this is not for our family. Like we had assumed that we would do entirely the opposite. Like there's enough of us.
And I don't think that like that not to say that that's a bad choice. Like if you want a child that looks like you, that's a definite choice.
The irony is our son looks like us, which is
our son literally looks just like us. But like not that it became the design element of that made us.
Yeah, it's almost like a designer baby. And
Yeah.
like that's not what you're looking for. You're just looking for your baby. And when you have a baby, even naturally, you never know what your baby's, it's going to look kind of like the two of you, but all of a sudden it could have traits from a grandparent that you never thought like, oh my God, why does my child have red hair and green eyes?
Well, and we wanted that organic experience, right? We wanted we didn't want we didn't want to have all the control and then feel either resentful or remorseful for the
Responsible.
or responsible for the things we chose. We like we understood that like we kind of wanted to take care of a child, not the child uh, we implored into the world that we made happen, and that's what made us choose adoption. And then going down that road, you get 50 million options. Like you
Oh, there's
can,
so many. Like off the top of my head, I know like the first one is like an open adoption or a closed adoption. And then it's like, are you adopting in America or are you adopting in another country? Or all these different things that go in. Is it an older child or is it a baby? It's there's so much that goes into it.
Well,
yeah.
one.
And
Go ahead.
the technical term of closed adoption that we used to know in the past, where you didn't know the birth mother and they didn't know you, isn't really a isn't really practiced anymore. I like the idea of closed adoption now is like, do you have connection with those people? But like we post birth or post adoption, like, do you have a relationship with those people? But in terms of like the knowledge of like you will 100% know who you're dealing with in terms of the birth mother and or uh, family that the child comes from, and they'll know who they're adopting to. um, yeah, and just so we started going down the path of adoption, and the first thing we thought of was adopting out of the country. And for us as queer parents, we were told by our lawyer very quickly that there are only, um, at the time, which was six, maybe 7 years ago, there were only four countries outside of the United States that, as a queer married couple, would allow us uh,
Wow.
to adopt a child from that country.
Do you
Now,
remember which countries those were?
yeah, at the time it was Colombia, Mexico, South Africa, and Brazil.
I believe, yes, and
And
Brazil.
now I just looked it up, and now it's Colombia, Brazil, and the Philippines only.
Wow. So things shift constantly and just
Yeah.
the climate of the world. But that's limits your options for sure
Yeah, I mean,
of
or the other option was like if we wanted to adopt from China or any other country that allows out of country adoptions, one of us could have gone to that
We
country.
would have had to get divorced
To,
first.
yeah, we would have had to get
wow, an
divorced.
actual divorce.
Yeah, yeah.
Like wow.
Um, I don't know though. There's wiggle room around that. We didn't really actually look into that, but like essentially, one of us could have applied to adopt a child
As a
in
single father.
as a single father in said country. And when you do that, you have to go to that country. Most of the time when you're adopting outside of the country, you have to go to that country for at least a month to make sure that that they can ensure that you're
A real
um
person and that you'd be good with the child and that you're not just
correct.
taking children at random. It's
Correct.
it's so for me, my family structure, so like I have my mom and my dad who are married and then they had my brother and I biologically. But I also have, and my listeners will know because I've actually interviewed one of my godparents, but I have my godfathers and they met at Rooster Fish way back in the 90s and have been together ever since. And they're like my two other dads. And they don't have actual adopted children, but like they have like one of their nephews and then they have us. And
Yeah.
for me to hear that, like, I know that it's more difficult for gay parents to adopt, but the love that my godparents have given me, my brother, and his nephew, it's just, I'm so lucky to have them in my life. And so I just think any child is lucky to have two parents that really love each other. So it's a bummer to hear
Well,
that still in
and if
this
you
world.
like, well, and you think about it, and you go. For us, we go like we had to really want to be parents
Yes.
to go through the process of essentially I would say it was from when we started thinking about it to when we actually had our son was upwards of 2 years, to maybe a little over 2 years,
It's the 3 years.
um, and we had to really want to be parents. Where some and people who get pregnant and have a kid in 9 months, like like yes, they really want to. Most of the times, really want to be parents, but we had to really think about it, right? So like to like and really understand what it was for us to be parents. And so
You have to communicate that. You have to, it's not just to know it. You have to be able to tell the story of your desire to do this and how you want to do it. And that ends up being so crucial in terms of, I don't know, again, if anybody knows this, if you're matching with a birth mother for an infant or really any adoption in where we ended up, which was wanting to adopt an infant, and finding to do that in our country was going to be more accessible or more plausible, you know, in a great way. The birth mother has complete freedom to choose the adoptive parents of her biological kid. So you have to be able to tell the story of like why your family is interesting and cool and what your goals and hopes are for your child. And then they get to choose from God knows how many, options. Because I believe, when we were doing this at the time, there were 25,000 infants put up for adoption each year in America, and about a million families trying for those kids.
That's crazy. And also, and I know this from just like stories I've heard, but also in your guys' movie, the two characters struggle because they've gone through the process and the birth mother at some point either was fibbing, or I've heard of people where the birth mother at the birth actually backs out of the adoption because she does have the option to choose all the way up. Did you guys experience something like that when you guys were going through your adoption process?
Yeah, we so I something so the way we started our adoptive process in the States was you can go straight with an agency and hire an agency to help you. You'll always have to get a lawyer at some point, but we luckily here in Los Angeles, which I realized uh, after we adopted, was we ended up getting in touch with a lawyer who also acts as a sort of matchmaker, and and usually your lawyer only comes in to do the practical lawyer, the actual official paperwork for you. But he actually helped us through our process and educated us on a lot of it. And so there's two ways of matching with the birth mother. There's a whole network of agencies in this country, and at the time we were looking for a child. The the only thing that a birth mother had to provide was, in order to be deemed a birth mother that could put her child up for adoption, was proof of pregnancy written from a doctor and a welfare check from a social worker. And so when so we so basically uh they start sending you situations, and it looks in the style of like maybe a one sheet or a two sheet that is only information that the birth mother is willing to give up. It tells like what most likely she is having, either a boy or a girl, and whatever
What her
information
living
about.
situation is, if she has other kids.
But it's at her discretion, right? She's
Yeah, like
allowed.
she doesn't have to disclose like her. Does she have to disclose like her race or her anything like that?
They tend to do those sorts of things.
Because that's just like a blanket thing that doesn't really say anything about who she is. Like she doesn't have to say her job or where she lives or anything. It's at her discretion.
Any information like that is usually like two sentences.
Yeah.
She's 35-year-old woman, she's single, and she is has two kids already, which again, most women putting their children up for adoption in this country already have children of their own, which is also not really widely known.
And then you get to choose whether or not
The-
uh, to submit yourself to this situation, and then uh, and those usually come from an agency, right? So like the agency is going national, so right, so like they're going to they're going out and seeking people all around the country because you can adopt from any state in the country. And you get to choose, and so we also there's also like every state has its own laws on what you said right earlier, which is like when a birth mother uh can change her mind, right? And so like there's a lot of southern states when we were when we were adopting that like even 30 days after the adoption the mother could take the child back. And so you have to gauge your temperature as to what you're willing to go through and what sort of and so we would every single situation that would come to us we would question each other as to whether this was a situation we were comfortable with, whether the state was a state that we wanted to deal with, whether and so our first one, our agency that we were talking to was in, I believe, one of the Dakotas, right, B?
yeah.
And the birth mother was in New Orleans. So they sent and so we didn't meet with the agency yet. We had to essentially pay for communication with this birth mother. So we paid the agency to get us into communication with this birth mother. And
they hadn't met her either because they were
they
in
had
the state.
yeah, so essentially she had contacted them to represent her. They went off and found adoptive parents to match with her, and then they handled all. And when you match with the birth mother, you are financially responsible for her welfare, her meals, her children's care, her living situation while she is still pregnant and sometime after, right? And and so she showed proof of pregnancy, and it wasn't until the social work visit that she kept pushing off that we found out that one of the social workers in New Orleans had previously worked with her and found out that she wasn't actually pregnant.
Wow.
And we found out that and so we were 2 months into that situation, and I'm a bit more magnanimous when it comes to this because I go like, if they're doing this, they're doing it because they have no other option. And so like I understand the mental state if you have other children and you found a method that works for you to gain money. I guess I understand it, but it still affects us, right?
Well,
We
it's
are
disheartening.
still
It's
yeah,
disheartening. And you're going through this process and you think you're finally achieving a dream. And then the rug gets pulled out from under you. And then it's like, how do you trust anyone moving forward?
right.
Well,
And that gets us to the point of how we actually found the method that works for us or that worked for us and made us feel comfortable was our lawyer knew another lawyer in Sacramento, which is where we had where our child was from. And so it was a person to person contact. He knew specifically the the lawyer who had the client, which was our birth mother. And so, and the first contact we had with her was an entire email about her situation. So we knew for sure she was pregnant, and because the lawyer had met with her, so we knew for sure she was pregnant, and that she asked us specifically, please do not bail on me, right? So we knew that she was in this to adopt her child before we knew her full situation, which we respectfully will keep
Of course, that's
hers.
private between her and you guys.
Yeah, but that she was 100% in on this situation, and we were like, oh, okay, if we were ever to do this again, or if we were ever to give anybody the information on adoption, it's like it it is the scale of how comfortable you are with vulnerability and putting yourself out there and the capability of being hurt often.
Well, and the other thing that I would say is, there was such a difference in our birth mother, our eventual birth mother's approach, and the first person who was scamming us. And I don't want to talk about this in a way of discouraging people from going through the adoption process. It's part of it. You should be very clear that this can happen, and it's happened to some friends of ours who have also been through the adoption process. But it shouldn't discourage you from trying to do this if this is something that is in your heart and in your mind. The one thing I would say is just be very upfront with the people that you're working with, to be like, we know that this is a thing and we want to avoid it. Obviously, you want to avoid it. Let's just be really all on the same page about it. And the difference between the birth mother who ended up working out for us and the one who didn't was like night and day in terms of her certainty about her situation and the seriousness with which she approached us. What matched ours. And
Hmm.
that was, I think, a really good sign. Is she was feeling as vulnerable about this, and making sure that we were on the same page as we were, in that moment. And then what happened, which was so nice and so kind of felt so organic, is she led the whole process from there. I mean, our first conversation to holding our son in our arms was like less than 6 weeks.
Wow.
So, you know, she had it in her mind how she wanted this to work, and it worked like that. And our commitment to her at that time was just going like, we will do what you need. Like, this is a huge,
Like, we're here to support you
yeah,
through this process, like, because you guys are literally all in it together. It's
yeah.
not just like she's doing it alone or you guys are doing it alone. Like, it has to be the three of you in order for it to work.
And it had this sort of emotional quality of a trust fall, and kind of like that speed.
I love that, B. You've never said that.
Well, I just thought of
Well, there we go.
it.
So, now that you guys have your child, how old is your child now?
He's 5.
He's 5.
He's 5. So, what are some of the unexpected things of fatherhood that came along with adoption? Because I'm sure that it's similar but different to when you have a natural birth. It's like, here's your baby, now go. And I mean, that's how it is at the hospital. My mom said that when she walked away with me, they just said, okay, bye. Like, you have
Yeah.
a baby, go put it in your car, and like, you're
Yeah.
off.
I mean, one thing I will say about the hospital, and again, this is like a perception thing that we
Yeah.
want to really like drill in on. The nurses, so we were 4 doors down from the birth mother in the hospital, and the nurses treated us like we were heroes and treated her really badly.
Mm.
That's terrible.
And it was like, no, 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 you guys don't get it. Like, we're not the heroes of the situation here. She is.
Yeah,
Like,
because she's fulfilling your dreams. It's like the
completely.
whole,
And like,
yeah.
we're the child is not unwanted. The child is meant to be put into a situation that is stable and is the best. Everybody has agreed that this will be the best circumstance, and that's a team decision.
Yeah, and
Like,
actually, the
we-
child is very wanted. As you
Incredibly
guys
so.
said, it's like, and she wants to give the child the best opportunity that he has. You guys have gone through all of this process where you had to solidify your desire to be fathers. So this
Yeah.
child
Yeah.
is incredibly wanted.
She
Totally.
like that was, and we'll talk about fatherhood, but the bravery of I can't imagine being 4 doors down from the baby I just gave birth to, and then walking into that room. She didn't, her choice originally was not to see our son, because she thought it would be too hard. She made the bravest decision in the world for us to walk into our room the day she was leaving, and he was laying on my chest, and she just said, "Hey, look at that. He's your son." And gave that to us. Gave us the blessing. And I can't imagine what kind of hero superhero strength it took her to do that. But it was the because that's going into the parenting thing for me, was like, especially with adoption, I had the fear that I was going to be constantly going, I took somebody's child. I like almost imposter syndrome in a way of going like I like he's not supposed to be with us. I always had that fear. And when she gave me that, when she literally looked at me and just said, "He's your son," not a moment, not a day after that have I felt like I'm not my child's father. And and and
Also,
I
when somebody throws up in your mouth, that's usually a good sign. It's your kid.
but I owe her everything for that. And and getting into like the parenting elements, it's like I feel like once you have like I think that was the biggest thing was we only had 6 weeks. And so we prepped ourselves more so than prepped our house. We didn't have a thing in our house for our child.
Didn't childproof anything, all
Well,
the
and
sockets.
and also like I think we were both so kind of nervous that it might not work. And that there was, because the first time we had done some of that stuff and like cleared a room and like started to make moves. And I think we were both like really like, oh, if we do this and it doesn't work out, like, how's it going to be? And so we were just much more chill, I think, on the second time around. Like, yeah, if we need when we need the crib, we'll get the crib. When we need all the stuff. And so, I think that there was a cool, again, it became like a very organic. I mean, the word that comes up for me over and over again is like, it ended up being very organic. Like when we got the kid, we were like, oh, he needs this. Let's go get it. And like, that's kind of been the relationship to our son that has carried through. And the thing that we sort of committed to our birth mom and to each other was like, we need to meet him where he is. I think both of us were raised, um, and
Cautiously.
this is no shade on our parents. Both of us were raised in a way where like they had really strong ideas about how they were going to do it. And they had like a philosophy of parenting, which could be good or bad or whatever, but it was like fixed. And our idea, but coming out of that and in conversation, in the years of conversation about how we wanted to be parents, was going like, look at your kid, like who is he today? Let's meet him in the morning and be like, who are you today? And how can we service that today? Like this morning, he was grumpy. He was really mad and he didn't want to go to school and all that. And I was like, okay, how do we get through this now? And like, I'm not interested in like the sort of long-term, I am, of course, I want him to be happy. And that
But
was
you're interested in the now. What can like
yeah,
let's live in the moment and see where we can
yeah,
go from here.
yeah,
Well, and we also implore a pride in him. I think that like from day one, we had a weekly conversation with him, even though he couldn't compute it because he was a tiny little baby, about what his adoption situation was. Because we were like, we're going to get this wrong, right? Like we're going to tell this story wrong, and we apologized for a lot in the beginning, right? And so after that, we our story began to change into something of beauty because he like so many people wanted him in this situation, and he was chosen to be like so that he feels so much pride around being the son of two dads. He has so much pride around being adopted. He goes around, he wears little glasses, and he's so proud of him. He's proud of his differences, and he's proud of his uniqueness. And I don't think had we done for us, had we done something like had we done surrogacy and designed it and chosen all of the things, I think we would just kind of neglect some of those things where like we get the opportunity to tell our child how special he is every single day.
Yeah, and he gets that's right. And I totally believe as a little baby he remembers exactly all the
Maybe.
words. No, because those
I
are
hope
deep
not, because they were really bad.
those are deeply ingrained in his humanity. He will
yeah.
remember forever.
Yeah,
He
we
will
basically
know.
had this conversation to an infant. So, that's maybe
Well,
we
it's
need to
important.
teach
It's important that he knows where he came from, and also, again, how loved he is, and how chosen he was by you guys. That you guys knew that you wanted this in your hearts, and you had to communicate it to other people. And here you still are communicating your love for your son
yeah.
through your art and through this conversation.
Well, and that's the
Yes,
thing, the
they
movie
each
is,
have. They each have. We when at the hospital we gave them each broken heart locket. So the birth mother has half and Washi has half.
And then what I was gonna say was like our movie ends up being kind of like I mean, kind of like a weird love letter to him because it's sort of it's a sort of absurdist take that begins in this scenario and ends up somewhere entirely different and with different comedic kind of end. But that was something we didn't really consider either, as like he is in the movie briefly, and he's also like, it is so much about our love for him, and the extents that a parent will go to for their child. Like it's a and that became such a relatable thing to audiences who've seen it, is like, yeah, you'd do anything for your kid. And that was from the second that we knew we were having him, we are like, oh, I'd do anything for this guy. Like, we'll figure it out.
So that is all the time that we have for today. But David, Brian, are there any final thoughts that you'd like to share with the audience?
The movie's in theater June 6th.
Yeah.
Please go see it.
Heck yeah. I was going to plug it.
I would say just to, like, if anybody's considering having a child in any way, like natural surrogacy, freezing, anything, just like check in with yourself and know exactly what makes you comfortable. Don't do what everybody else is doing or what you think you have to do. Like, make sure it's the right decision for you, because for us, spending 18 months figuring out how we wanted to have a child made us actually understand that we really wanted to love a child
and consider adoption. It's really crazily rewarding, emotionally cool thing.
And don't be afraid to ask questions, because we were afraid to ask questions in the beginning, thinking we'd look like stupid and or ignorant. But ask every question you have, because there is not one stupid question in adoption. People need to be thinking about it a lot more.
Thank you so much to my guests, David and Brian, for coming onto the show. Honestly, I had goosebumps during parts of the conversation, especially talking about the birth mother. I think she is an angel in life, and just the bravery that she had and the love that you have for your son. So thank you so much for sharing. And
this is wonderful.
As they mentioned, be sure to check out I Don't Understand You in theaters on June 6th. Go have a fun time. Get to see the not so true story of David and Brian, but wink, wink, it was a lot of fun. I'm Gala Avery, and this has been The Gala Show. The Gala Show is brought to you by Avery.com. This episode was executive produced by Roger Avery and produced by Gala Avery. Music composed by Andy Milburn. Additional sound mixing by Eric Clapp. As always, I'm your host, Gala Avery. Copyright 2024, all rights reserved. Despite me sharing the same last name with this charity, I don't have any affiliation with it, besides the fact the issue is very near and dear to my heart. Did you know that in the United States, 2.7 million children currently have a parent in prison, and it's estimated that 10 million children have experienced parental incarceration at some point in their lives? I was one of these kids, and as an adult, I am really grateful to be able to give back to Project Avery. Their mission is to build leadership from within by supporting community through programs such as mentoring and outdoor education, and also to remove the stigma surrounding having a parent that's incarcerated. You don't have to feel alone. If you know a kid who could use these resources or would like to donate money or time to the charity, please go to Project Avery, that's AVARY.org, to check out what this amazing charity is all about. Again, that's projectavery.org. Thank you guys from the bottom of my heart.